there are so many different lit RPGs and so many
Yeah.
different progression fictions. I guess people will be picky about where they invest their time, and has been our theme a little bit, that actually anything can really work and find its audience in the world of lit RPG. I mean, Morgan and Merlin launched on Royal Road about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So it's something that was probably the first thing that I wrote, and that was really just I'd read Beware of Chicken, and I just thought it was the most hilarious thing that I'd ever come across.
We can, just to start, I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself, introduce your books, talk about sort of what you've written beforehand, and I'm really interested because we've never actually spoken before, so this is great.
Yeah, so I'm Malory. I haven't been writing all that long. My first series that came out was Psychomarine, which came out just before Christmas, and since then I've had a few more Psychomarines have come out, and then the series that I have with Legion came out with Morgan and Merlin's Excellent Adventures. That is the third one in the trilogy, came out yesterday.
Yeah, that's great, honestly. And so do you mind just speaking a little bit on like what sort of each of the books are? Obviously they're very different. You have a sci-fi focused one, and you have a more like fantasy Arthurian one on the more recent. So yeah, just speak to them a little bit.
Yeah, so my series, Royal Guard Psychomarine, is very much sci-fi lit RPG. So the idea there is that Earth is invaded by a very hostile force that lands first of all in Australia and completely removes all Australians. As a big cricket fan, I took that one very, very seriously, that all Australians had to be purged immediately. And then very slowly that invasion starts to spread out across the rest of Earth. Fortunately, there's a second alien race that are seeking to sort of displace the first, and they come and offer humanity some help. And they take various humans that they deem worthy up into space, and then they provide them really with the system, and they provide them with some armor and some weapons, and then really release them out to go and do battle against the Gehenna, really. So that first book is very much focused on trying to force back the invasion from Earth, and we do save the Australians, which I sort of didn't feel too great, but that's how the first one ended. And then really, as that series has moved on, it's as Jake has powered up throughout the the series. We've moved first of all to Mars, and then Mars falls, then it moves further out into the galaxy. Book 6 is with the editors at the moment, and that's in a whole new area of the universe, and the humans have sort of fled and needed to try to find a place to carry on leveling up, really, to give themselves the power to be able to properly force back the invasion. So it's a pretty violent, pretty brutal series, really. But what I'm hoping for really is people that like lit RPG and sci-fi, where there aren't that many people that were sort of writing in that sort of sphere, but modern day, that sort of very human sort of element, and a team really that are taking on the aliens. So that's quite a lot of fun, I think, and the audio version is very, very well done. I think I've been well served there with on Audible for that. And then my second series really is almost a complete flip round, really. So it's cultivation rather than lit RPG. It's a female protagonist rather than a male, and it's back in Arthurian England, and that's really a very, very fiery comedy. So whereas I think with Psychomarine you've got quite straight, brutal, big battles, big fighting, a very different sort of genre, really focusing on that personal growth and that progression, really, that the protagonist makes in developing her own power, in order to be able to support the rise of Arthur into Tintagel. That's quite a lot of fun. Again, I think the audio is very well done by Jess there. I think she does it in a very very captures that tone. And I think between the two, really, you've got two very different takes on fiction, really, which is very, very power based, very fighty based, versus that very internal, very developing your own sort of view of how being a better person really drives that progression.
Yeah. How is it that you sort of jump from, did you write them towards, well, you probably wrote them around the same time, or did you want to write one like well before the other, or sort of, how did that sort of work?
I mean, Morgan and Merlin launched on Royal Road about 2 years ago.
Okay.
So it's something that that was probably the first thing that I wrote, and that was really just I'd read Beware of Chicken, and I just thought it was the most hilarious thing that I'd ever come across. And I thought, well, rather than having something very much set within that sort of Eastern setting, what would it be like if we had a sort of somebody grabbed out of their own world and forced into a body that wasn't theirs, but we did it in Arthurian England. I know a fair bit about the Middle Ages and the Dark Ages and that sort of that worldview. And I thought, well, this could be quite a lot of fun, because if you took Merlin out of Arthurian legend, you've got quite a big hole for somebody to need to fill. So really, that was the idea. What happens if it's like Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court, really? If you take a modern day person and stick them in the gap created by the murder of Merlin, what happens? And I think really that it's just fun, and I think that was what I was writing there, was just have an awful lot of fun with playing around with the tropes and playing around with a protagonist who doesn't take it very seriously at all at any stage. It's only really the third book, and that, as I say, came out yesterday, that she does sort of take on board that she's got a role now, and she's got to take it seriously and has to properly fulfill the role as the court mage. So that I wrote quite a long time ago, and then with Psychomarine, that's been written much more recently, really, and has been a much, or almost, as I say, trying to take what I'd learned from doing Morgan and Merlin and seeing, well, let's move it into a male protagonist now. Let's have a look at something that's much more stats focused, because some people wanted more stats within Morgan and Merlin. Thought, so let's have more stats there. Let's have more of a real focus on the mechanics of how you level up, rather than a voice in your head that's a magician telling you how to do it. So those are so really, I think I'd wrapped up Morgan and Merlin before I'd started with Psychomarine, and that's
no way. Oh, that's great. And then how have you sort of found, so you mentioned it before, but sci-fi, obviously there aren't as many stories, or they're not as popular, I would say. There are quite a few stories. There's some that have gone mainstream. You have your Iron Princes, Starbreaker by Luke Chilenko is one of the more recent that I know of. So there's some like there, and obviously yours as well. Do you find that there's this barrier that you sort of have to like overcome because it's sci-fi as well, or how have you found sort of pushing through that lens?
I don't know, really. I think fundamentally, when you hear the words LitRPG, you do tend to think Swords and Sandals.
You do, right? Yeah.
Where that goes, but I certainly haven't found that people are resistant to reading it. I think, because there are so many different LitRPGs and so many different progression fictions, I guess people will be picky about where they invest their time. And I think with Psychomarine, I think it was at a moment where people obviously wanted a bit more sci-fi, and it took off quite nicely. So I think that's it, isn't it? I think you sort of get your own momentum around a series, don't you, where because people are talking about it, people are reading it. I think I got quite lucky with Psychomarine, because I had a character use the word yank to describe somebody else, and it blew up on the LitRPG Books Facebook page, because some people found that I was misusing it, and it was clear that I didn't know what I was talking about. And then loads of people came from a different thing, like, no, this character is from this part of America. They would use the word yank. There's about 4,000 comments about this, whether this was right or wrong. And I was just sitting there going, gosh, I didn't really anticipate that was going to be the moment that very innocuous moments about halfway through the opening chapters. And because I have an American editor for that, and they made some changes to just sort of smooth out me being English and it being in America. And they were like, "Yep, didn't see that one coming." That was so I think that got some momentum for people going, "God, we've got to read this one where the Yankees is all discussed." But no, I don't think there's been any real challenge with being in sci-fi rather than not. It's just there's so many of, and when you've read this, do you want to read that? There's more that are Swords and Sandals, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think it's exactly like you said. There's so many different subgenres and sort of niches and genres within LitRPG. Do you find, so I talk with other people about how LitRPG is in itself a subgenre of fantasy or sci-fi. So in itself, having to explain that first off, do you sometimes find that it's difficult to explain LitRPG to people, or do you sort of have a way in which you sort of ground them and be like, oh, it's like Lord of the Rings, but with game mechanics, or it's like, you know what I mean?
Almost exactly that, isn't it? Well, imagine you were in a computer game of Lord of the Rings. There we go. Yeah. You are starting off. I think Isekai is a little easier because I think people get their head round They're just like, oh, okay, that's like, and that's fine. But I think the notion of either a system apocalypse or something else, that people are like, right, and that goes into a computer game. Like, no, not into a computer game, but like a computer game. But I think certainly Matt Dinnerman's success has sort of meant that more and more people at least are aware of it as a genre rather than just being, that sounds very strange. I think when you could say, well, this is something that people are talking about in mainstream fantasy fiction now, it makes it a little bit easier.
Oh, absolutely. The success of that story is really blown up, especially in the last year. Like, it has been remarkable to see, and it really does make it easier to say, hey, do you know this story? Okay, then yes, please think of mine as well. Because absolutely, that's great. So was Morgan the first story you'd ever written? I don't want to speak about anything else from a pen name perspective if you don't want to speak of it, but was it the first thing you'd ever written, or had you written beforehand?
I mean, I've written my whole life, really, but I think it was just having access to, I'd never heard of Royal Road, and it was literally, I've been reading, I got Kindle Unlimited subscription for Christmas, and you sort of stumble into the books that look like the sort of things you want to read. And then from that, I sort of started to see that some of the language in the back where they were saying, well, you can follow this on Royal Road or join these Facebook groups. And really, I think having stumbled across Royal Road, you start putting stories up because you think, well, I've always written stuff, but your wife and your friends, they tell you everything you write's brilliant, but putting something on Royal Road where people will tell you it isn't, that's quite a different experience. So as I think I started on Royal Road about maybe 2.5 years ago. With Morgan and Merlin, and that was a really good experience, because it's odd when you get criticism that you go, oh, that someone actually knows what they're talking about. They're not just being, I mean, there's trolls, but then you get people who go, actually, that what you've just done there doesn't quite work. And you go, actually, you're right. It works for me because I know what's going to happen in 50 pages time, and it works for people who love me because they'll be willing just to let it go. But a random person on the internet will just tell you, yeah, I'm stopping reading now. That's dull. So that was really good, and I think that I really enjoyed the process of writing that. And then when I'd finished the first one, people said, well, why don't you approach some of the publishers and see if they would like to run with it, because I haven't got the discipline to self-publish. I just wouldn't be able to. I love writing and I love creating the stuff, but the actual process of ending, that was never ever going to happen. And I was really fortunate that Legion were very keen, and then have worked with me over that trilogy. And then having finished
your covers
are just insane, aren't they? I mean, that's it, where you just go, yeah, that's why having a publisher is good. They absolutely got what I thought it needed to look like. And then the artists have just been, I mean, the third one, and that Lisiana Colettas has done, has just been, I mean, I think it just looks just so apocalyptic and just gets that vibe just beautifully.
I'll ask you to send it to me after so I can put it on the screen while we're talking about it right now, because it's just it really is beautiful. It's really well done. I was sad, so Legion may not be as part of the sale. Maybe I'm still trying to push them a little bit. They may not be part of the sale, because it would have been fantastic to be able to include your Merlin stories in that, because they really are very, very nice. But sorry, back onto. So do you find that you read more on Royal Road because you sort of have like spent so much time there on it as an author perspective, or are you more of like a KU person because you said that you got it for Christmas?
I think I would initially you read everything you can on KU, don't you? It's very, very easy, and it's on your Kindle, and you sat there at night and doing it. But I think having had the experience of writing on Royal Road, and I think that had become quite a good way of sort of seeing, particularly when you're trying to see, well, what are other people doing that's working that mine might not quite have got. And I think something like Rising Stars there, not all of them obviously, but it certainly gives you a decent input onto, well, I've heard of that person before, let's have a read what's there. And sometimes it's quite nice when you find an author that you enjoy to sort of go back to, if they were on Royal Road, what was going on there as well. So I think I'd probably split equally between. And certainly I think when you're trying to find people that you want to shout out with, it's very useful to have had a good read of what they've been putting on there and sort of see what their vibe is as well. So I think Royal Road is a fantastic resource for people who are frustrated writers who just thought, well, I don't actually know if what I'm doing is any good. And I think being to put it on there and be able to get that feedback and be able to engage really with people who will tell you what they think about what's just happened. Or I've made changes to lots of stories based on feedback that you've got where someone's gone, nah, I see what you're doing, but no. And equally, when people have said, well, had you thought, when people are trying to predict where it's going, the next series I've got coming out in January with Legion is a murder mystery in a lit RPG world. And that was really interesting because people were trying to foresee who the murderer was going to be across the trilogy, and that's quite nice because when you get to the end and people go, okay, well, or either yes, you gave just enough clues I could have got that, or no way, there was no way that was going to be obvious. That's quite nice, and I think particularly for that sort of writing where there is going to be a big twist. It was nice to be able to sort of preview a twist before you take it to a publisher and say, I think this has got quite a good vibe to it.
Yeah, really. That's really great. So you already have that third book like ready. I think I did see that it was on pre-order already. So maybe we can talk about that one if you want as well. Yeah.
The whole trilogy's done.
Already done. Wow.
Yeah, it's all done. It's all the front covers are there. If you look on Royal Road, you can see them again, fantastic artwork at the front covers on each book. The reason it's coming out in January is there's a narrator we particularly want for the audio, and that's their availability slice. So the idea really is to be able to release as we've done with Morgan, the audio and the ebook at the same time. So that's what will happen. I think book one launches in January, and then I think it's March and April. That's again very, very different genre. It's a proper noir sort of murder mystery, set in a sort of, if you like your Terry Pratchett, which I love. It's a sort of set in a sort of a Los Angeles version of Ankh-Morpork, really. And the protagonist there has lost their class. They're the typical down at heel private detective as the book opens. A case went wrong and the city has stripped them of their class, which means they have no powers, they have no abilities, and it's a world where you really, really need them. So it is very similar to that sort of Philip Marlowe, Sam Spade sort of figure, but in a properly lit RPG world. And again, that's done quite well on Royal Road. People seem to be very, very pro it. And it's a trilogy of books with 3 different cases that are all sort of underpinned by how did this guy end up classless. So that will be out in Jan, and hopefully people will enjoy that. So a sort of a sci-fi, a sort of fantasy, and then a more hard-boiled sort of murder mystery sort of one. So 3 very different genres, really.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely very different. So like in terms of, so those are the stories, and because they're so different, do you outline well in advance? How do you sort of go about determining the genre?
Yeah.
Do you sort of read something and you say, hey, I want to really go down that path? Like, how is it you sort of figure it out? Because those are very different paths, right?
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? You read something and you go, "That's really cool. I hadn't thought of that." So it was Beware of Chicken for Morgan and Earth was because it was just, well, what would that be like? And then the sci-fi one, I think there've been quite a few quite big sci-fi shows that I'd caught on TV, and I thought that would be an interesting way of doing it. And I think I quite liked the big invasion and the big threat to Earth sort of quality to it. So that was with that, and then the hardboard detective. Really, I think again, I think we were watching something on Netflix that had that real sort of gritty, dark sort of investigation quality to it. And again, that sort of sparked that notion of, well, what would that be looking like if it was a lit RPG? Because again, if you're investigating something, but you're investigating ridiculously powerful people, so like in Chinatown, that line at the end where Jack Nicholson is told, "Oh, forget about it, it's Chinatown," and it's just like, well, if it wasn't just Chinatown, but the people had godly powers and you couldn't possibly mess with them, how would you go about trying to prove somebody had committed murder? And I just thought that was an interesting juxtaposition, really. So you just hope somebody else is interested, because at some stage it's so niche, people go, "Yeah, it's just you, mate. No one else was interested."
Well, it's like you said, with LitRPG, that really doesn't happen as often, right? Because there's so many different types of readers out there. And really, I know a lot of people talk about the idea that it's mostly like male readers, but I'm seeing that isn't the case nowadays. Yeah, like there really is anybody under the sun. We talked about Dungeon Crawler Carl beforehand, and
Yeah.
you the amount of TikToks that I've seen with like old grandmothers who are reviewing Dungeon Crawler Carl, it's just remarkable, right? Like it feels as though there's no genre or no specific reader anymore. And maybe there's like an age of sorts, but even with for like lower ages, you have some people like Pixelate or Rob Billow who are able to come out and create these books that are more middle grade focused and more kid focused as well, to really indoctrinate them early, as they might say. But there's definitely a lot out there, right?
But the big issue that I used to be a teacher, and the big issue we always talked about was, how do you get boys to read? Because all they want to do is play computer games. So like, well, the most obvious way to do it is you have a very clear genre that tries to replicate that experience. Really, that's how you get people to read. And I think there's a lot of merit in that idea.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you do see a lot of those articles that say boys aren't reading nowadays, and I'm always stunned by it. Because obviously we're in like an echo chamber of sorts, but within our echo chamber, it seems like that isn't the case in the slightest bit. You look at Royal Road and it's like millions of people reading these stories. And like I said, I genuinely think it is mostly boys on there, at least. And you think of that, I think they're just not being captured by these like main demographic stat takers, because it's so like out there. It's a website that people don't think they read web fiction, so it's somewhere where they're not seeing. But that's a whole other conversation. Yeah.
But that's the importance with Dinman getting published, isn't it? And getting hard, because then suddenly you're having people having the artifact, not just, as you say, the digital, which is hard to track.
Are you an audiobook person as well? I know you said that you got some fantastic audiobook narrators. Do you find that you listen to your books as well, or are you generally only reading them?
I think certainly I use them when I travel. So I think when you've got long journeys, that's where they're so successful, isn't it? Because you've got, if someone's doing a daily hour-long commute and you've got audiobooks that are 40 hours long, then suddenly you've got a good week's worth of commute, haven't you? And I think that's where I listen to. You're talking about very unusual sort of niche stories. I listen to Chrysalis as the audio.
Fair.
Yeah. That's just amazing. The narrator's hilarious, but also the very concept that you're listening to something about an ant. And please, nobody ask me what I'm listening to and from work. That's a conversation you don't really want to have with people. It's like, what is this ant, you see? And this ant is growing, and it's a plucky ant. But yeah, I think it's all about the narrator, isn't it? I think if you find a narrator whose voice works and who gets that across, I think that's what brings them so much to life.
Oh, and I think we're so spoiled for that. So I'm not actually an audiobook reader, listener as much, but I definitely have heard quite a few, and I know that anybody who is recognizes that we get some of the best of the best. And obviously there's people who can just read a story, and then people who actually perform it. And obviously you're going to talk about Jeff Hayes and all that stuff, but there's people out there who are just so fantastic at what they do. And I've spoken with a few of them, like Andrea Parsnow and Tess Irondale, and sort of my own stories and stuff. And the craft of performing these books is just so fantastic, and it really does like elevate the story, which is awesome to hear.
And I think that's what's propelling the genre, isn't it? I think you'd probably say it is via audiobook that more and more readers are coming to it, and what they'll often say is, I'll get the book after I've heard it. And I think that's a very important feature of the genre.
Yeah, no, I know we keep bringing it up, and I'll just leave this topic in a moment, but if we think about DCC again, Jeff Hayes and his performance of it, I think honestly is one of the main reasons that it got as popular as it did. I think that anytime you see it on TikTok, and I try to not go there too often, but every now and again I want to try and promote there where possible. You listen to people and they say if you're reading the book, you're doing it wrong. You should be listening to the audiobook. And at the end of the day, it elevates the story. And I want my books at one point to be able to get that same sort of reach. And you definitely see that as an author and say, okay, maybe I need to sort of switch my own thinking as well and do that sort of thing. But it's awesome that you have these publishers that sort of already are thinking of that for you, which is fantastic.
Yeah, I think that's really important, particularly when you're new and you're starting out, because you need that sort of impetus behind you.
Yeah. So I'd mentioned in one of our initial emails, and again, not to put you on the spot, I said some hidden gems. So I'm wondering, do you have any stories that you've read or that you really enjoy that you think that we should sort of call out, or that people should go and look out for that maybe they don't know about? Are you comfortable doing so?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think when you said that, I thought, well, what would count as a hidden gem? And I think what leapt into my mind were ones where you've got very unusual protagonists.
Sure.
So the one that I think I've only just finished the final one is All the Dust That Falls. I think that is, I don't see that mentioned very much at all. And you think you got a story about a sensitive rumba. That is just. It shouldn't work on any possible level. It should be silly, and it shouldn't be something you want to. But it absolutely stuck with me, and I think I blasted through that. And I think that I think Reborn as a Demonic Tree was another one where I thought a story where you just have these month-long gaps where he freely admits nothing happens, and then you jump into it again. Everything you know about stories and narrative tells you, well, these stories shouldn't work at all. And we get told so much, I think, about LitRPG that it is all about that sort of male protagonist, that very, very clear self-insert character. I think anything like that, and then Chrysalis as well, where you go, well, these are the opposite of those sort of stories. Really, they're ones where you've got protagonists that you shouldn't be able to identify with, at least not easily. I think those are the ones I'd say people really should go and check out. Because they are so unusual, and I think they do show you, as I think has been our theme a little bit, that actually anything can really work and find its audience in the world of LitRPG.
Oh, absolutely. As you mentioned Chrysalis, and as you mentioned those stories as well. One of the stories that's like as part of the sale that I keep looking at every now and again, as I'm like setting up the page and everything, it's called The Hero is a Duck. So it's literally about a rubber ducky that is the main character, and
definitely go check that out now. I've got that.
Well,
that sounds very much up my road.
Well, that's the thing. There's so many different stories, and like there's so many different main characters. There's ones about slimes, but there's so many about slimes now.
Slime's a big one, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. So it's definitely really interesting to see how these monster evolution stories really like go from one thing to the next. Last year I had a blueberry. There's this author, and I'm trying to make sure I reference them correctly because I know they have a couple of pen names, but I think that one's Nick Evans, and he wrote about a blueberry that evolves over the course of several books, and I didn't read it myself, but just the thought of a blueberry being the protagonist is crazy to me. So I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yeah, definitely more non-standard protagonist, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Because you're absolutely right. Especially towards the beginning, where you think about like The Land and all the VR stories that started as the Russian lit RPGs. A lot of it was self-insert, super op, very, very powerful main characters that really were just going off and doing whatever they wanted to do in this world where you can sort of do anything. And it was good. And there are a lot of stories that do it very well. And I would still say the most popular of the stories, the Primal Hunters and the He Who Fights with Monsters and the Dungeon Crawler Carl, they're still of that sort. But you definitely see a lot of that. You mentioned some really great ones that do try and go outside of that mold and still do very, very well, which is so awesome to see. Fantastic to see. Sort of going off of that lens, I'm going to bring up an image, and on the image I have about six different stories, and I'm going to use this as a way for people to get a sense of sort of like your reading habits as well, even though we've talked about it. But of these ones that are fairly popular stories, I'm going to get you to say 4 that you think are the top of the top and 2 that you may not like as much. So I don't want you to get canceled anyway, but ultimately it's just a good idea for people to say, hey, these are the stories that sort of you're out here reading and sort of that you like. So for those who are just listening and not watching, we have Jake's Magical Market, The Primal Hunter, He Who Fights with Monsters, All the Skills, Dungeon Crawler Carl, and Defiance of the Fall. So I think these is obviously they're all very different, but I think it's a broad spectrum of stories that are fairly popular within the realm. So do any of these sort of stick out to you right away?
I think the one that I absolutely, particularly I loved book 1 was Jake's Magical Market. I think it was just so different, and I think with some of those that you've got on there, you go, well, they all sort of follow a very similar thing. But I thought book one of Jake's Magical Market was very much my thing, with the sort of that slacker vibe, and I think that was something I really enjoyed, and then all the skills as well. I don't really feel very much for the card based ones. It's not a genre I've necessarily bought into that much, but I really enjoyed that, and I thought it mixed quite nicely with a few other things that I was reading. I thought, well, this idea of somebody that's having to grow and look after something and develop their own at the same time, and I like the sort of hidden quality to it. Dungeon Chronicle is obviously I think the one, isn't it? I think that's the one that's there. Primal Hunter I loved. I think both with Primal Hunter and Defiance of the Fall, I loved them until I couldn't keep track of them anymore.
Sure.
I think, and to be fair, Hero 5 to the Monster, I think they've got so big now that I think you find yourself sort of, gosh, there's a lot that's happened here that I'm trying to keep in my head in order to go forward. But I think anybody would say the first 3, 4, 5 of those are fantastic. And then I think you have to be a real fan quality to say, well, that's absolutely something I'm gonna pick up as soon as it comes down.
I think you're so right. I think so I'll stop sharing because I think that's fantastic, and I think that was great for sort of what I was trying to get at. Of the stories, do you find that there's this like propensity to sort of write as much as possible nowadays? So like with Psycho Marine, I think you said you're getting onto your 6th. With Morgan's Adventure, it sounds like you did a trilogy. With your next story, it sounds like you did a trilogy. So was that a deliberate action, and do you worry that sort of goes against these lit RPGs that want to have like 12 plus books in a series? Like, how do you find you've made that decision, or how do you find that sort of goes against the lit RPG?
I think there is a tendency that because people like it to have more of it, and I think that there can be a focus on doing that. I think for me, you have a world where everything makes sense, and you're trying to plot it out to make it quite careful. And I think with the series that'll be coming out in January, it had to be a trilogy because that was the arc of that story. That's not to say there couldn't potentially be more, but it would have to be a real movement away from what was quite a deliberate. Well, there's about 500,000 words here, I think, altogether, and that was that story nicely tied up. But I don't think you ever set off and you say, well, this is the definite hard end point of the story. You always want to think, well, you can always take it somewhere else. I think it's widely acknowledged, I think, that for some stories they have gone past perhaps the area where people were really calling for them. And I think I wouldn't want to get to the stage where people were reading it because, oh, well, it's out and I suppose I better. I think you want people to go, oh, I'm quite interested to see what happens next. But I think saying that, I mean, I think what's really nice about DCC is that there is a clear end point coming, and I think that's driving its narrative onwards, isn't it? That each book is a literal floor toward an obvious end point. I think not knowing if there is an end point makes things a bit harder, isn't it? I think none of us. I mean, I some of my favourite books were Patrick Rothfuss, and you just like, I need that to finish. I need that to finish because it's so sad. Because whenever people say, well, what should I read? And you go, you must read this. It's brilliant. But be aware, not finished. And I think that's hard, isn't it? Because you want your story to end in a way you don't want to feel that you're just left waiting constantly for something to finish.
Well, that's why I think you're actually like probably a reader's favorite author of sorts, right? Like you're someone who seems as though like you have a goal of like finishing a story, and it sounds like you do so like really nicely. You seem to finished 2 series by the sounds of it within a few years, which is absolutely fantastic, right? And are you planning to finish Psycho Marine anytime soon, or is that one that you're going to have ongoing as you write other stories behind the scenes, or what's your plan there?
I think that the idea is for that to be a bit more ongoing, just because there is an almost monster of the week quality to that, which against its backdrop, But I think the elephant is in the room, really, isn't it? You write them until people stop reading them. I think that's the point, isn't it? I think if you get to the age where you release one and then it just doesn't there, then you think, well, we probably need to wrap this up. But I think that's the point, isn't it? I think trilogies work because I think we're all familiar with that from movies and our own experiences, that you like to feel that you're moving towards a conclusion. And there aren't that many completed series really out there, and I think that's quite in itself an interesting point, isn't it? That people say, well, this actually is finished. So if you're looking for something that gets resolved, this will be resolved for you, and that's quite a nice point to make.
Oh, absolutely. So on that, I'm going to ask you a couple of final questions to end, but I want to make sure that you have an opportunity to tell people again which stories you're intending to put on sale for the Massive LitRPG Sale or whatever that's happening. Talk about your books one last time, so make sure that we can sort of finish and end with like you and focusing on your books, because that's what the intention here. And then sort of where can people find you? Are you sort of on any of the social medias? Do you want people to follow you on Royal Road, or where? Do you have a Patreon that you want to plug? So I'll leave the floor to you one last time.
No worries. I mean, you can find me literally everywhere as Malory Author. So that's Facebook, that's X, that's Patreon, that's TikTok, that's Instagram, that's Blue Sky. I'm not discerning. I'm on all of the social medias as Malory Author. Royal Road as well as Malory Author. I think one of the things that I think everybody you talk to is going to say is it's really nice to talk to people that read stuff. So I think never ever worry about following anybody on any of the social medias, because that's what we're looking for more than anything. The story that so Royal Guard are very on board with your sale. So I think Psychomarine and its audible will be available there. That again, if you're interested in big humanity, I mean, I started putting this on. I don't know if you know the Reddit group HFY on Reddit. It's humanity. Fuck yeah, is the idea. That's where it started from. And that's its vibe basically. Is you're looking for humans killing aliens. That's Psychomarine is humanity. Sure. If you're looking for people to doing it with their mind, so proper psychic destruction. That's your one. As you say, you're not sure if Legion will be on there, but if it is, I would hope that Morgan and Merlin's Excellent Adventures book 1 would be there, which is a very, very different thing if you're looking for what happens when someone who's totally not supposed to be the main character ends up as a main character of Arthurian legend. But yeah, I think anything which gets people to read more LitRPG is brilliant. I think the idea of your sales fantastic, because things that get more audiences is the point, isn't it? Really, like more people being able to read and just a variety of stuff as well is the way forward.
Well, trust me, there's going to be a big variety, and I was going through it yesterday, and there's going to be a lot. Okay, so that is fantastic. And honestly, before anything, I want to make sure you hear it. Thank you so much for actually agreeing to this. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate you doing this. I'm going to ask you a final couple quick fire questions. I think they'll be interesting because you are someone who has, by the sounds of it, done at least 3 other like very disparate, separate subgenres. And I think you are someone who probably will do even more in the future. So here's a couple quick fire questions for you to sort of end this interview or conversation or whatever you want to call it. So it's sort of like a would you rather. Of these 2 genres, would you rather, and do you think you will write romance or historical fiction in the future?
Historical fiction.
Yeah, I know.
It isn't for me.
We're not going to have the Marines not going to get into some romance in the future.
Not my bag. Not my historical, definitely.
I'll follow back up with you in a couple of years, and then we'll see. There's probably going to be a romance or 2. Portal fantasy, so isekai, or VR story. I know that both of them aren't as well. Isekai is still pretty popular, but could you see yourself writing either?
I think isekai is the one that speaks, isn't it? I think it's that idea of taking the familiar and making it unfamiliar. I think that's where I'd be. I think I find with the VR stories, the stakes don't ever tend to be. It's hard to get the stakes right. I did play around with one. But it was just like, how do you make it matter in the real world and in the virtual world without diminishing either? I mean, Seth Ring does it brilliantly, but I couldn't get it to. I couldn't get what was happening in the real world not to overshadow what was happening in the game world. I thought, well, why would you bother reading the story if it was what was happening in the real world was more important?
Sure.
But it's not. Yeah, definitely, it's a guy. I think.
Okay, and then your last one. Would you rather write, or I don't know if you already have, a war scene or a chase scene?
I think war scene. I think
War?
the scope. I think the scope of it's fun. I think chase. I, I'm not someone that will sit and watch a film and then we'll have an hour-long car chase and be like, "Oh, this is
Sure.
tense."
Yeah.
Whereas I think a war scene has that. I think there's an epic quality. I think
Yeah.
I like that sense of being able to have something big and massive taking place. Whereas a chase, yeah, you go maybe if you've got it tense enough, but no, I like the epicness of a big battle. I think.
Do any of the three, and maybe on the Marine side, are there any war aspects that have happened? Have you had to write anything like war?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Psycho Marine is basically war from page one to
Sure.
page 8,000 or whatever we're up to at the moment. What was really interesting with the Arthurian one was obviously war in Arthurian times is totally different. So I
Yeah.
had many hours of going down rabbit holes looking at how shield war fighting worked and
Yeah.
what made sense, and then what happens if you give someone who's got magical powers into the middle of it. Shield wars don't work out so well then. It's
Yeah.
that falls down quite quickly. So that was quite a lot of fun. But yeah, I think there's a difference between taking a war scene quite seriously with real proper high stakes, and then a war scene which is literally, well, this was all fun and games until the guy dropped the fireball, which is basically what happens repeatedly in
Yeah.
or in book 3, which has just come out. There was what I tried to quite a big battle scene where they were just getting it, where the soldiers were just getting swamped. And you know, well, how are they going to get out of this? And I went to bed, and then you woke up and well, you've got someone with almost unlimited power here. Let's just destroy everything. Like, yeah, that works actually. It's like just everything just goes poof. She one of her techniques is that she's able to pull metal into herself and then let metal chi go in one go. And if you do that on a battle scene, you solve the problem really quite quickly. That was quite nice. Oh yeah, we should do this more often. Just wipe everybody out by turning their swords onto themselves.
That's fantastic. That's actually a great use of the power.
Yeah. But it also makes you think, why was I worried about this? You'll just miss them all in seconds.
Often enough, the amount of times you spend way too much time just thinking about how to get out of a situation is often like longer than writing the actual solution, which is frustrating in itself. Well, thank you so much, Malory.
Yeah, no, it's been great fun.
From August 22nd to 24th, I'll be running a massive LitRPG sale. That sale will include at least 200 free ebooks, all within the LitRPG and progression fantasy genre. I'd like to thank everyone for checking out the site, checking out the sale, sharing it where you can, and an especially big thank you to all the authors and publishers who have given me their blessing to host this site. I really do appreciate it. Come grab some free books.